Welcome to the 246th episode of the Jami Dulaney Plant-Based Wellness Podcast. My name is Jami Dulaney, and I'm your host. I'm a plant-based cardiologist and endurance athlete living in Southwest Florida. Welcome and thanks for listening. Might sound a little funny. I'm actually in the office studio, so our might have a little bit of an echo in here. I hope it's not too awful bad, but it's what you get because I am the lone gun for podcast production, editing, and everything, so got to do it while you can. So, Leadville 50-mile Silver Rush race in Leadville, Colorado is still on, July 8th. This next weekend is the marathon in Leadville, which is known as the toughest marathon in the United States because of the elevation, and they've actually had to alter the course because the snow is still high up at Mosquito Pass. So I'm hoping that the course is going to be okay for July, but it'll be what it is, and we'll all get to running, so that'll be great. Still pulling the tire, about 0.4 miles. Try to get that almost every morning now. Doing my mile on the treadmill at 15% grade. Now, in addition to my cornhole bean bags in my vest, my running vest, I'm adding mangoes because our mango tree, it's not our favorite mango tree, but there is a mango tree that's available to us, has some mangoes on it. So I'm picking up about 5 mangoes. They're not very big ones. At about mile 3 on my 6-mile run. So that's adding a little weight to the pack. So it's all good training. Otherwise everything's a go. So we're going to keep up keeping up. We do a balance / mobility / strength course in the office on Mondays. So we've been doing a lot of quad work, practicing getting off the ground, wall sits and so forth, which are also good for, it's also good Leadville training or any other kind of training. So that's all good. We've been started doing a progression. So for people that can't get off the ground without using their hands, how do you progress and work your way down? So that's actually been quite fun. This week I want to talk about taurine. It's kind of like creatine that is all the rage. Taurine is in, most notably, the monster drinks, the energy drinks, the 8-hour energy drinks, and all those other things that are high sugar, and they have about 1 gram of taurine in them. And it is marketed and hyped to the point where they call it almost an essential amino acid. So it's not an essential amino acid. It's almost an essential amino acid per the marketers, but it's not really almost. It just isn't. But taurine is actually derived from cysteine, which is is an essential amino acid. So that's how they kind of come up with that. It has to be synthesized, and it is synthesized through pathways that ultimately use methionine and homocysteine, and you've heard those chemicals, I'm sure, into essentially taurine. True carnivores don't make taurine, so cats need taurine, and in cats they can get a cardiomyopathy and blindness if they don't have taurine. And from what we know about cats and cat food, commercial cat food is often heated and can actually destroy the taurine, and that's why some cats can get deficient. Certain pedigrees of cats or certain, have more of a need than others, or more prone to cardiomyopathies, so they probably need a little bit more taurine. Taurine is this, we as humans make taurine. So if you're an omnivore, which we are, we don't have giant canine teeth, we can make carnivore from cysteine, which is an essential amino acid that we eat, which is available from a plant-based diet. But the big hubbub about taurine is that a study came out, and as studies do come out and want to attract attention, especially from people selling taurine, is that they showed that, or they touted the study as taurine is a life extension. So it's a longevity amino acid and might hold the key to improving longevity. Sounds like a great thing. What could possibly go wrong? Just go out and have a Monster Energy drink and you'll live forever. And how they came to this conclusion was they looked at a couple different ways. They looked at monkeys, 5-year-old monkeys versus 15-year-old monkeys, and noticed that the taurine decreased in their bloodstream about 85%. So the first thing that comes up is, the question is how you're measuring things. Are you measuring plasma levels, blood levels? Does that correspond to what's actually in muscle and liver? And all of that is somewhat unknown. We do know that plasma taurine and blood taurine levels vary quite differently, and they vary according to the time of the day and depending on what people eat. So you can imagine that the numbers are kind of all over the place. But they saw a decrease in monkeys as they got older. And then they looked at mice and fed taurine. They were taurine deficient versus mice given taurine. And they noticed an increased lifespan, 12% for girl mice, female mice, and 10% for male mice. They also noticed an increase in muscle endurance in male mice and a decrease in depression and anxiety in female mice. I'm not sure if that was a questionnaire, or the mice just seemed a little less jitty. I'm not sure about how that goes. But then they extrapolated. So obviously mice don't live forever, or they don't even live near as long as humans. It turned out that the mice live 4 months longer. And then they extrapolated that to humans, saying that, well, humans could live 8 years longer if they had more taurine. And there have been some studies out there that have shown that older people living in a nursing home may have decreased taurine levels. And if you are being kept alive by tube feedings and there's not enough taurine in it, you could have lower levels. Again, I'm going to go back to the cat food example. Depending on what you eat, you may not be given the essential amino acids to be able to make taurine. And I don't think anybody would argue as we get older, our ability to make some of these enzymes, our amino acids go down. But, is that a chicken or an egg process? So is it because of declining health in general that people are losing their ability to synthesize taurine? Is it because people's diets, and dietary preferences as they get older, change, and so they are more likely to not get enough essential amino acids from various sources or a wide enough variety of sources to make taurine? And does it really, truly make a difference? It's kind of funny because if you look at people that are usually the consumers of energy drinks, you don't really think of those as the people that are going to live the longest. But nevertheless, maybe that, maybe all that sugar and caffeine and taurine's enough to keep them going. Who knows? Well, what's my problem with this? It's like, Doc, why don't you just take some taurine, if it might help a little bit, why not do it? What can it hurt? And that's the exact question. So is there a downside to taking taurine? The people that are carnivore-based or meat-based promoting would point the finger at us plant-based people that, we're certainly going to be taurine deficient because taurine comes from animals, and if you're not eating any animals, you're not going to get any taurine. But humans can make taurine, so that shouldn't be the problem. But they'll say, well, you can't make enough as you get older, so if you really want to do well as you get older, you should probably start eating meat again. So the backside of that is methionine and cysteine, which are the precursors of taurine. We know that methionine in particular has cancer-promoting DNA-damaging effects done in excess. So one of the things that may be part of why plant-based people do better is because they actually have less of these sulfur-containing amino acids that become toxic. So if you look at what a plant-based person eats versus what an animal or carnivore or omnivore type person eats, we kind of dribble things in. I've said it over and over in the podcast. We dribble in nutrients from a variety of sources. You may have some oatmeal, you may have some fruit, you may have some tofu, a variety of different fruits. You may have a variety of different vegetables, where people that tend to eat more of a meat diet may only have one vegetable. So we might ultimately eat 16 different things in a day that dribble in various nutrients. And so we get all of the essential amino acids that we need, but not excessive amounts, and we don't get excessive amounts of the ones that are toxic, such as methionine and cysteine. So methionine actually has been shown to inhibit cancer, methionine enhances cancer cell growth, and it can also enhance the benefits of chemotherapeutic drugs. It's been shown to, a methionine decreased diet, and the diet is shown to decrease fat production, increase insulin sensitivity, decrease oxidative stress, and actually extends life in rats. So the same rats, or I guess the mice that live longer with taurine, die quicker if they're rats and they're given methionine, by the tune of about a 40% reduction in methionine resulted in an increased survival of the rats. It also has some cardioprotective effects on different hormones, decreasing cancer incidence overall. So a low methionine diet is associated with a protection against these things. And they've actually worked out the mechanism on how a low methionine diet protects people from cancer. One of them is a glutathione production. One is when it comes to promoting cell proliferation and DNA changes. It seems as though that cancer cells are much more sensitive to methionine than non-cancer cells. So people on a low methionine diet tend to do better. Again, and then there's an enhancement with chemotherapeutic agents. There's also an increased production of glutathione that scavengers reactive oxygen species, basically decreases oxidative stress. If you've looked at Dr. Esselstyn's book, Prevent and Reverse Heart Disease, part of nitric oxide and how it works is it dilates arteries, but one of the things, and if you eat greens, you increase the production of nitric oxide. However, if you have greens in a steak, you decrease the production of nitric oxide, mainly because the inflammation and the oxidative stress that a meat in the diet occurs that actually ends up blocking nitric oxide. So again, a diet low in methionine will decrease oxidative stress and is therefore beneficial. There was also some benefit of restricting methionine as rats age. So again, what people tolerate as a young person, what rats and mice tolerate as young versus old, also vary in age. And, I'll go back to that garage. Once your garage starts to fill up with metabolic waste and cellular debris, we tolerate less insults. So an older person tolerates less metabolic insults than a younger person. Eating McDonald's and fries as a 10-year-old may not cause them any grief. 50-year-old eat McDonald's and French fries. It may be what turns them, what lights the match that ultimately causes the heart attack, or, lights the match that causes inflammation, or at least terrible indigestion, which it wouldn't occur in a younger person. Same thing happens with some of these amino acids, and that some of the ways they work differ in young versus older. So some of the DNA damage doesn't seem to occur so much in younger rats as it does in older rats. And so, it comes down to it, as we age, what can you get away with? I remember my dad was a real lover of sweets, and my grandmother was a great baker of pies and cakes and so forth, but especially pies, and my dad really liked pies. And often on Saturday, my grandmother would make 4 different kinds of pies, and my dad would have a slice of each. And when he became a diabetic, finally, of course, my grandmother had passed away, he gave up eating pie, and he basically justified or consoled himself by saying, I ate enough pie as a young person, I don't need to eat it now. And I think that kind of happens a lot with things. You know, you can get away with a lot as a young person, but as you get older, you got to be a little bit more careful about what you're getting into. But there's been some studies done all the way back into 1959 that on rats, and if they withheld methionine and then they were injected with tumor cells, the tumor didn't grow, but if then they were given a diet higher in methionine, the tumor cells grew much more rapidly. In 1974, there was a study done looking at cell lines, and they looked at methionine-restricted growth factors when looking at breast cancer cell lines, lymphocytic leukemic cell lines, leukemic cell lines, liver tumor cell lines, prostate cell lines, and the tumor growth was severely depressed in mediums that methionine was withheld on. So depleting methionine, again, decreased the tumor cell growth. It was found that malignant cells lack methionine synthase versus normal cells, so they can't recycle homocysteine, so they're actually like, people say tumors like sugar, well, they like methionine even more, so when people are, the cell lines are put on methionine-restricted diet, they tend to wither up and die. So my takeaway on this study, before anybody emails me, what about taurine, or anybody in the practice, like, should we be taking taurine, or should we be worried about not getting enough meat in our diet? I thought I was deficient in protein. Now I know it's taurine. Not so quick. Again, I think a lot of this stuff is multifactorial. Nothing happens in a vacuum. I would like to see a study on blue zoners and what their taurine level is. Again, perhaps the lower level is very beneficial as we age with regard to cancer and tumor cell growth. Just like dogs, cats can't make vitamin C. They make vitamin C, so they don't have to eat oranges. We make taurine, so we really don't have to eat it. And there's some reason for that. I don't think we know all that yet, but I'm pretty sure that we don't have the canine teeth and the need for taurine that my friend Tony the cat needs. If some of this taurine talk made you concerned about your cat friend or even your dog friends, the biggest source of taurine is in the fast twitch muscles. So, you know, chicken wings, chicken thighs, legs, and things that move fast have more taurine. So again, if you wanted to extrapolate it into the I just eat lean chicken breast people, they're probably not getting much in the way of taurine either. But you know, for our animals, we try to get them highly contractile sources of animal muscle, such as heart, thigh, and wing type of thing. I guess people that eat chicken wing gets a lot of taurine as well as a lot of cholesterol and fat. So again, going down the road with my friends, the carnivores, on the Twitter feed, people have been posting their calcium scores and saying how healthy they are because their calcium scores are 0, because even though their cholesterol is 300, so that they're not at risk for coronary artery disease eating their 5 steaks a day. And again, we need to cry foul for that because we have to look at the population. It takes a while to grow your coronary artery disease. So when I look at these people eating carnivore in their 30s and 40s, you know, they may stay lean because they're eating relatively low calories, but it's like, call me up again when you're 70 or 80 and let's see how things are going, or perhaps even 50 or 60. But the reality of it is, most young people, the reason why people have the big one, so to speak, the big heart attack in the 40s and 50s is because of soft plaque ruptures. So the plaques that are baby plaques, you start out with foam cells in early, and sometimes even teenage kids. These abnormalities in the blood vessel wall from inflammation, cholesterol, and so forth. And these abnormalities in the blood vessel wall are nothing more than maybe a little road rash, so to speak. And then they grow over time, and cholesterol and inflammatory cells start to grow under the endothelium, and it pops up like a pimple that is tender. And as it grows, the cap is actually very soft, and the cholesterol crystals can break through that cap and cause a blood clot formation, and that's an acute myocardial infarction, the big one, so to speak. The only one that a stent will improve someone's longevity. So if you have an ST elevation, a STEMI, acute occlusion of a coronary artery, that's when you need a life-saving stent, and you need your interventional cardiologist. Other people better off changing their diets. Calcium scores don't pick up those plaques because they could be 20% soft plaques a day before they have the big one, and it ruptures and they have 100% blockage of the artery. So young people eating their 6 steaks a day could have a 0 calcium score and have an infarct the next day. And you could kind of see how it can happen. You could have a soft plaque, and you have all this TMAO generated from all this meat that they're eating, all this inflammation and oxidative stress, and boom, they have their heart attack. So when someone brags to you that they have a 0 calcium score despite eating a terrible diet, not so quick. As we age, we tend to have these soft plaques that may become stable and they become calcified. That's what's picked up on a calcium score. So yes, there's vascular disease if you have a positive calcium score. How bad it is or what the prognosis is depends on a whole host of other factors. So yes, it's a good idea if you have a positive calcium score to look at your diet, look at your exercise, look at your inflammation, see how you can improve yourself. But it's not necessarily a reason to run and jump and get a heart catheterization and a stent. So it depends on how you want to deal with things. The internet is full of people throwing doctors under the bus, and we certainly throw a lot of doctors under the bus in our office as well, because they tend to not take time with people and treat people with medication and protocol and not individualize things. And yes, all that is a problem. But when you're having the big one, you need all hands on deck and acute intervention and a stent to save your life. Same way with cancer, to sit and do nothing and continue to eat a high-fat diet in the presence of cancer, probably not going to do well. So a lot of people don't want traditional medical intervention, but they also don't want to change their diet and lifestyle. A lot of people are very brave about not caring. You've got to die of something. I'm going to enjoy my life. I deserve this and that. But when push comes to shove, and it's the choice between most likely dying or chancing it on an interventional therapy of sorts, they're going to choose the interventional therapy, which may make them patients for a long time. So, what we always tell people is you don't necessarily get to choose how you're going to die or how long it's going to take. There can be a lot of interventions between you and that keeps you from doing the great things that you want to do. So healthy lifestyle, longevity, maybe even not longevity, but a long health span, if that's what you're interested in, most likely you're going to have to look at your lifestyle, which includes nutrition and exercise. A simple thing, which is not so much like a soft plaque, is a blister. If you're working in the yard, or you're you're new to running or walking, or you're on a 100-mile hot run, or maybe even a 20-mile run, or maybe you're just going on vacation and you're walking in shoes that you usually don't walk in, and you get a blister, the first thing that happens is you get a puffiness, and it's become sore. There's a fluid filled under the skin, under the dermal layer, and then it pops in it, and it hurts. This is the time of year, especially in Florida, when everything changes with regards to blisters and chafing. Chafing, a lot of times people get under their arms, legs, jog bra lines, anything that it's pretty much a lot. The etiology is like a blister, which is heat, moisture, and friction. So if something's moving back and forth, if a running belt is moving back and forth on your waist, or a chest strap is moving back and forth underneath a jog bra, or just the jog bra is bouncing up and down a little bit, or on your shoulders, you can come in and have some nasty chafing. People with new shoes or the wrong shoes, specifically the wrong socks going out, can get some nasty blisters that derail their exercise. So everything's going great and they get a blister, and then they stop, and that's the end, and it's 6 months later, and of course I can't go out because it's too hot, and so there's a big downfall. So how do you prevent these things? Again, friction, heat, and moisture. If you're someplace now in the south where it's 90 to 100 degrees, we're in the heat. A lot of good benefits from the heat as far as a cellular level and ultimately decreasing inflammation. So it's not to be avoided, but it needs to be, your exposure needs to be with caution, just like you're going to not want to get fried with sun. You don't want to have a heat stroke. You want to have your hydration up, but when it comes to blisters and chafing, you want to pick garments that are less likely to cause you a problem. So, 3 miles is one thing, 10 miles is another, 20 miles is another thing, but keeping it dry as possible, and then using some sort of lubricant or skin protection. So the best thing that's ever been invented is diaper rash protection, right? Because diaper rash is the ultimate form of chafing from friction and moisture. So the Desitin, Balm-X, Burt's Bees, zinc oxide are really good base creams to put on in areas that you chafe. If you don't want the white sticky layer, good old Vaseline can work. There's a product called Aquaphor can work. There's a specific running anti-chafing called Body Glide, Squirrel Nut Butter. These are all really, really good things to put on in areas before you go out and get chafed. So under your arm, along your jog bra line or chest strap line, or on your feet, under your socks. Cotton socks are not your friend in the heat. Socks that your shoe eats are not your friend. If it starts to happen, then you need to address it sooner or later, because once you get the blister, it's kind of too late. Good fitting shoes, so that running shoes or good walking shoes should be about a size and a half bigger than a dress shoe. It's kind of funny because probably most dress shoes should be bigger than as well, but we tend to cram our feet into good looking shoes, and we don't want them to slip. So I'll leave that as that. I'm currently wearing Luna sandals because of it, just to let my feet be my feet and spread out. But a good running shoe that fits with a wide toe box is certainly good to prevent blisters, about a size and a half. Tying your shoes correctly, so putting your foot in your shoe and bringing your heel all the way to the back and snugging it up. There's also an extra little eye in the running shoes. It's really up high. Most people ignore it. It's not there. It's not usually the laces aren't through it when you get your shoes. You can use that extra little eyelet to snug in your shoes and snug in your heel, especially if your heel's a little more narrow than the front of your foot. So you can snug things down so you don't have the friction of the shoe running up and down, rubbing up and down your on your foot. Even sandals in the summertime, if you have a between the toe or around the big toe, or the way the sandals cross your feet, a little of the Body Glide or a little lubricant goes a long way to protect your feet, especially until things are broken in. So just an FYI for summertime heat protection. So it's not an excuse not to go out. If you do get a blister, pop it, but don't pull the skin off. Let it kind of heal down. Treat it with an antibiotic, or you can do a Manuka honey or some other just antiseptic type of, not drying, but something that'll just keep it a little soft. Even Vaseline on top, or the zinc would be a good thing, and then cover it up with a Band-Aid, and then something over top of that so the Band-Aid doesn't rub off. The other thing is calluses. People think that calluses are protection of the feet, but if you look at the people that run in sandals, or the Taurine or barefoot runners, they have really smooth feet. Calluses are from not hitting correctly. So if you rub a callus, it typically is where your foot will rub on a shoe or rub on something because you're not striking the ground, or you're rubbing inside a shoe. And you can get blisters underneath the calluses. It's kind of a nemesis for me because I'll get those under a bad toenail. And they're very hard to kind of get to because the callus impedes you from being able to stick a needle and drain it. So the best thing you can do is take a little Dremel, for a pedicure, is have that, or a stone, and keep your heels and sometimes the big toes and sometimes the end of your toes nice and smooth. So that you don't get blisters underneath. Look at your shoes. Why are you doing it in the first place? Perhaps your gait is such that you can change a little bit to make that a little bit better. I used to be a toe, I still am, I guess, to some degree, but when I get tired, that toe curl my toes in my shoes to try to hang on. When I start to get tired, and by curling my toes up, then the toenail my second toenail pops up against the shoe and ends up friction causing a problem underneath that toenail. So it's real important that I keep my toenails short, keep them filed down so they're not thick to catch on. Because even if they just catch slightly on your sock or your shoe, you're at a big risk of having trauma to the nail bed and or a blister, and ultimately either losing a toenail, having a black toenail, or having a blister. It's almost a given for anybody that runs long distance that they're going to have trauma to their toes. There's even a guy, Marshall Ulrich, that actually had his toenails removed before he did a race across America because he had so much trouble with his toenails. I don't necessarily recommend that. I certainly lose a fair share of toenails after long races, but it's pretty manageable if you pay attention during the race. So just a bit of word of the wise. I'm trying to hope I heed it. I actually have a blister first aid kit packed for the 50-mile out in the Silver Rush 50, and certainly if I'm considering 100 miles in the future, that has a kit that I can kind of take care of my feet on the road, so to speak, and patch things up. People tape their feet to try to avoid them. You got to watch if the tape comes off; it can cause more problems. So there's a lot you can do, but the big three are preventing prolonged wetness of the feet, so they shrivel and cause them to the skin to separate, friction, and the heat. If you can air things out a little bit, good thing. The last thing I'll say about that is I've actually for all my runs, I used to only wear toe socks for races, but now I wear them exclusively. Keeps my toes separated. I've not had a blister between my toes since I went to toe socks. I do put a little Body Glide or some squirrel nut butter at the end of my toes to try to keep that from being punishing to the end of my toes, but I do wear the toe socks. Several companies that make, I typically wear an Ingest, but there's another during the week, and Exoskin socks for the races because they're so probably a little bit better in the moisture wicking thing. The last thing I'll say about socks is thickness. When I first started running, I got the thickest sock Thurlors that I could find, thinking that my feet will feel better if they have more padding. Not so. The thicker the sock, the hotter they are, the more potential friction. So don't think thick is better than thin, but stay away from the cotton. And different socks fit different feet, differently. So find socks that work for you, that your shoes don't eat. When the elastic tends to go out of the socks, they tend to fall down and move more as well. So watch out for those. The other thing is some socks, because they're so tight, keep your toes together. And so if you're prone to have your toes cross over, that can make things worse too. So pay attention to all those things, and it'll keep you moving and keep you off the couch. So as always, if you'd like to know about how we interact with people and our membership practice, you can go over to drdulaney.com, DOCTORDULANEY, and find out what we have to offer. Our nutrition class and Zoom classes are live Zoom, and then they're put up on our members-only website, as well as the recipes to what we cook in class. Tonight I'm going to go to a grocery store and take a group of our members on a grocery store trip so that we can learn foods. What do you do with certain vegetables? What things to stay away from? Label reading, marketing, how not to fall into things. So if you have some interest in that, we can certainly do a lot of things online as well as in person. But check out the website. If you have questions, email me at jami@drdulaney.com. It's JAMI@drdulaney.com. As always, I appreciate you listening. If you like what you hear, go on over to iTunes and give us a nice 5-star review. If you don't like, please don't go over. Whatever you want to do. There's also discounts on the website for Mama Says and the Aqua Nui distillers. Both products I really do like. Again, I'll put a little link to the socks that I use. Not that I'm sponsored by them, but I believe in promoting things that I think are good companies, including Grounds and Hounds Coffee. It's not because, like I said, I get a kickback from the stuff, but I do think it's good to promote good companies. So have a nice week. Get out and move. Don't forget your anti-chafing protection.